Very good. We are now recording. Thank you, Rex.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to Citrus Heights Water District's second online virtual class. This one is called WaterSmart Basics, Groundwork for Creating Your Green Plan. So we hope to get some great information tonight. I welcome everybody that's attending, and I'd like to thank a co-worker that's with me today is Rebecca Scott. I'd like to say hello to her, and also to Martine and Cheryl, who are our instructors tonight, and they'll be filling you full of wonderful information, and we'll all be answering questions for you. Let's see, we do have a plan to hold future classes in this format if you're interested. We had a class on June 9th, last Tuesday, and that will be available online along with this class on our website, which is chwd.org. You go to our events page, scroll down there, click on it, and it will take you to our classes. And that's also where you can sign up for future classes. So look for that on our website, and again, welcome. Couple things I wanted to mention before I turn it over to our instructors, and that is we do have some rebates for our customers at Citrus Heights Water District. We have indoor rebates for ultra low high efficiency toilets, which are $75 a piece. You can get the application online at our website. And we also have a high efficiency clothes washer rebate, which is $50 for the new modern, more the front loaders, if you will, low water use washing machines. And the last thing I want to promote, if I may, is the free water irrigation landscape reviews. We can send out a professional technician out there to evaluate your system, write up some recommendations on how to make it more efficient, and leave you with the watering schedule. So that's a free service. It takes about an hour, and I urge everybody that's has a yard that they're irrigating to give us a call and sign up for that. It's a great service. And one last thing is we are having a raffle for all the attendees. If you're our customer at Citrus Heights Water District, you're going to be eligible to win a Beehive weather-based controller. We were chatting about it before the class started here, as people were in the waiting room and talking about some of the features. And I just want to say real quick, it's basic enough for somebody who just wants to set their timer manually, but yet it's advanced enough to where you can run it off an app on your smartphone or computer. So we're going to give that away. You'll be notified after the class once we select the winner randomly, and you'll be notified. So great. Welcome everybody, and take it away, Cheryl.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rex. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Cheryl Buckwalter. My company is Landscape Liaisons. I am a landscape designer, residential landscape designer, consultant, and educator. I hold certifications as a certified landscape irrigation auditor, as well as a qualified water efficient landscaper. And also I am on the board for the Sacramento district of the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. I'd like to now introduce Martine.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martine Carrion van Rijn. I'm the owner of Landscape Symphonies. I'm a landscape designer and contractor, and I have several certifications for water-wise landscaper, like with QL. And I'm also served in several board positions at the state level and Sacramento for the Association of Professional Landscape Designers.
Great, thank you, Martine. So I'd like to talk for just a few minutes about some housekeeping, shall we say. First of all, as Rex had said, the presentation and handouts will be available on the Citrus Heights Water District website on their events page. You see a little kitty walking behind me. I have 3 office cats. And so They will be available on Monday, so please be sure to check there. All the handouts that we'll be talking about tonight, as well as this presentation in the recorded form and as a PowerPoint, a PDF of this PowerPoint. Also, the presentation and handouts from Tuesday's webinar will be there as well, just in case you weren't able to watch that one. So a couple of housekeeping things though, everyone is muted except for our panelists here. You should have a little box that says chat underneath it. And when you have a question, please enter that into the chat box. And we will try to answer some of those along the way as they pertain to areas in the presentation that we're talking about, but also we will have time at the end for some questions and answers for the chat. And for example, there was one already about how deep do you have to insert the soil moisture meter. And really 2 to 3 inches, it depends on how far down you want to see how far down you want to be able to tell there's moisture in the soil. So if you put it in just a little bit, it might only show that it's pretty dry. You put it down deeper and it'll show that it's a little bit wet, a little bit wetter. So anyway, just wanted to touch base with you about that. One other thing, you will notice that some of the slides have a good amount of text on them. I just give you a heads up about that because generally we don't like to do that. It's kind of one of those rules of thumb. You know, you don't want to overload the slide, but because these are going to be presented or provided on the Citrus Heights Water District's website, we want you to be able to have ample information about what information and what information we're trying to convey, basically. So we had part 1, tonight we have part 2, and these are the topics, as you can see on the screen, that we will be providing. Martine? Thank you. So Principles of River-Friendly Landscaping is where we're going to start. There will be a handout there where you can see all of the 7 principles listed. And we do want you to take into consideration that these principles, landscaping locally, which means using local plant material, less to the landfill, reusing materials so they don't go to the landfill, and of course, conserving water. All 7 of these principles are interdependent. They work together so that we can think about how they can be applied throughout the presentation and throughout your plans. And that would be during design, during construction, during maintenance. So just think about that for us.
Thank you, Cheryl. We move on trying to connect this presentation with the first one we did on Tuesday. And I won't talk much about this, this document, but these are basically the considerations you would need to have a look into once you start to actually putting into practice all of the things we're gonna talk about today. You will see a handout online after, as Cheryl was saying, they will be at the website. So you will be able to look at that. And I highly recommend for you to familiarize with these principles. As a result of the previous workshop, what would you would have? Basically, the results, you would really want to have a good base plan to scale, where you will be able to actually start to do all your planning, laying out areas and finding out ways on how you're going to work with the issues that you have on your site. You would have probably copies with of your base plan with different different information that we mentioned in the first workshop.
Great. So in the first workshop, we mentioned that we will be talking a little bit more today about the landscape styles. What this means is that you don't have to have just one style or another in order to have a water efficient landscape and use the right plants. You can have any style and it can be applied to any size landscape. And you can see the different styles here, which I'll show you. And just think about using the right plants, the plants that are appropriate for our region and climate and conditions. And then you can have that different style. So here's an example. So first of all, we're going to start with the formal style. There we go. So with the formal style, you can see on the left-hand side, it is very formal. Everything is balanced, very symmetrical and so forth. You have these tall evergreen trees or shrubs that are framing the garden. Here's just a couple of the different plants that might be used. The one on the top, for example, stays very compact. It's just about 3 feet tall and wide, and it doesn't require shearing or anything like that, or a lot of pruning. So let's have the next style. Contemporary. Some people like contemporary, and Martine will be speaking about, and he spoke about on Tuesday, about how we want our landscape to be compatible with the style of our homes. And so with contemporary, you can see plants are much more lined up and in line. There's still there's balance, but it's offset some. So you can see how that is depicted with these plants. The next style then, Mediterranean. We're much more familiar with that because I know we do promote the Mediterranean type of plants to use, and what that means are plants that are appropriate for our region, but also other regions around the world with similar climate and conditions. So, you know, it's more formal. It is formal in a sense, but yet it has a contemporary flair to it. There's usually more terracotta or tiles used, a water feature, oftentimes fruit trees, lemons and oranges and so forth. The Southwestern style is becoming more popular, I think. One thing to keep in mind is that plants that are used in the inland valleys, for example, and in these desert climates, they're really more accustomed to having water, the monsoons and so forth during the summer. And so it is going to be important to keep in mind that we still want to select the right plants so that we can still water efficiently and you know, use plants as you can see here. A lot of times decomposed granite or some kind of gravel path is used. Another style, Asian or Japanese. There's a good example of some of the plants that can be used here. And so I encourage you to check out these styles more. We have a couple more here, I think. The Asian style will use many more evergreens and fewer flowering colors. And then finally, the California casual. That's what we just call it, because sometimes people think that to be California casual, it means that a landscape is all messy and unkept looking. And that just really isn't the case. Here on the bottom right-hand side, you can see that instead of lawn, for example, a plant, a ground cover type plant has been used. It's called Carapia. It's very popular these days. So I encourage you to look into it. And at the end, we'll show you some resources for plants. People are asking, can you mix styles if compatible? You know, you can develop your very own style that you know, go with what you like and keep in mind of what your style is. Do you like things casual? Do you like more formal? You can mix any way you'd like to. So Martine, can you advance to the next slide, please? Oh, we just lost something. Give me just a moment. I think we've lost Martine. Let me see what I can do about that. Bear with me just a moment, okay? Yeah, give me just a moment. I think we lost Martine. And here we go. Okay, and I'm going to go right to where we were. Give me another minute, everybody. All right.
Fantastic.
Yay, team.
Good job, Cheryl.
Okay.
No pressure.
I know, right? And give me one more second here. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. Let's talk a little bit about on-site water management. This is near and dear to my heart because one thing that we are trying to do is to make sure that we keep as much water on our landscapes as possible, and that we let the water slow, spread, and sink into the soil. So that's what we do here by shaping the soil, getting depressions and contours, I call them, and so forth, so that the water can flow, whether it's rain or irrigation. It can slowly flow and go into rain gardens and other small or shallow depressions in your landscape. And these are the reasons why this is so important. And that is because we want, as I said, the water to slowly sink into the soil. We want to create added interest and also provide habitat for the birds and the bees and so forth that are in our gardens. So next, here are just a few examples of what those contours look like. As you can see, there's a depression in here, and then it flows down and it comes along here. And then over here, we've got some water that is ponding for a little bit in this rain garden, and then it soaks in very quickly. Next, this is Martine's project. Martine, are you with us again?
Yes, I'm sorry, I lost internet for a second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So in regards to water management, this is how we handle the downspouts in the front yard. As you can see on the bottom, on the left picture, there is the downspout there. Everything is very flat. So what we try to do is we try to basically build a berm and collect the water so that it would hold and stay on site as much as possible and prevent it from running off directly into the street and into all our drain systems. Another important element in water management is rain gardens, to develop rain gardens. What rain gardens do, they collect a lot of water. There's a tremendous amount of water that comes from 1 inch of water, rainwater. In a 1,000 square foot roof, 1 inch of rain is about 675 gallons of water. Now, soil contains, has the capacity of retain a lot of water, which is one of the reasons why rain gardens are very useful. And because they can put that water back into the soil. They will also promote wildlife, and in the long run, they will actually help, putting that water in the soil will actually help us with not having to irrigate as much, because the soil will retain that water and we will not have to put it back into the soil through irrigation systems.
Great, and now you can see examples of slopes. One of the things that we want to do is we're contouring the soil. And if we've got a steep slope on the right-hand side, you can see some large boulders were used to retain soil. Also, you can add some interest, as you can see on the picture on the left-hand side. You can add interest by just using some blocky kinds of rocks to dry stack, meaning stack it one on top of the other, not higher than a foot generally. And that way you can have soil behind that dry stack wall and add interest and levels in your landscape. Also with ground cover, You can use low water use plants at the top of a slope and higher water use plants at the bottom of a slope. And why is that? Because the water runs down if it doesn't soak right in. So use plant material. This vegetation can really help to stabilize that slope. And if you use the right plants, then they won't require maintenance, and you won't have to, you know, risk getting injured by climbing up on top of a steep slope or anything like that. Martine, will you talk with us about some hardscapes for a few minutes?
Yes. In regards to hardscapes, there's different materials that we can use that can be water efficient. We really want to make sure that with our hardscapes, we allow as much water to percolate back into the ground. So we have what are called permeable, porous, or pervious materials. We can see here in these pictures from left to right, that's permeable, porous, and pervious. And they all have different degrees of water percolation, but that basically allows the water to stay on site. And what I was saying before, it will reduce the amount of watering that we will need to do with irrigation.
Yeah, that's great. And you can see examples here on the right-hand side. This is an example of a driveway. It's just all concrete, concrete to concrete to concrete. We want to try to disconnect or reduce those areas where it's just flowing from one to the next. And that water would just, rainwater irrigation, or when you're washing your car, would just sheet off and flow off. So we want, as you can see on the left-hand side, to break that up and create areas where water can soak into the ground. And Martine will talk about hardscape and the plan that was used in our example landscape.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. So now trying to tie it all together, basically in so many ways, hardscapes are what are trying to tie all of these things. And we have to do it in a plan. The best way to do it is in a plan, because it helps us plan for the whole project, gather all the materials and everything. So if we can see here in this project, we had in the back, we had a rain garden. And then we had all these paths and different patios, and all the materials here were permeable or pervious. We have, for example, that area is pervious. We had stepping stones and gravel paths, and then we had we had pavers set on sand, which allowed water to go through, and then we had lots of areas where we just had gravel and decorative gravel. So all of those hardscapes were thought with river-friendly principles to ensure that as much water would go back into the soil.
And I would just add quickly, when we talk about permeable and pervious, what it means is there are some materials, and there was a photo earlier, but there's some materials that the water will just flow right through. There are others where it's like a brick, and instead of having mortar in the joints, the spaces between each brick and around each one, it might be sand or a decomposed granite or a gravel, and that lets the water flow in between each paver in that way.
So in terms of the layout, this is an example of basically what I created for that particular layout of hardscapes. And if you can, of course, not everyone would be able to do this. I generally do this for my clients so that they can visualize it. But if you want to, you can learn. There's a SketchUp. It's a way that you could learn how to do it. And then it's really fun, and you can figure out how you can lay out your hardscapes based on your base plan that you created from the first workshop. Now here we are seeing all of the pictures of the actual completed project. As we can see, we have those pavers set on sand, and then all of the areas around them, they're also capturing water because we worked on the soil to ensure that the soil becomes a sponge and absorbs as much water as possible. And then we have as well, we have the rain garden there on the top left corner. And we have all the gravel, as we can see on the right, we have this porous materials with decorative gravel and gravel underneath and stepping stones. Edging, it is not always easy to define because define what we create on a piece of paper. How do we define it on a site? To do that, we have edging materials that help us create those shapes and divide those materials or those spaces. It is very easy to do it with concrete or hardscapes like pavers, but it is other areas is we use edging. So there's two different kinds of edgings. We have a metal edging or a steel edging, and then we have a composite edging. And for the project that we used, for the project that we did, we actually use steel edging, as you can see here. It has a really clean look. It's very durable in many ways. I would say this is my recommendation because it's easy to create those shapes and stays long. Stays for a long time.
Great. Now let's talk about softscaping. So hardscape basically is a non-water consuming, or are non-water consuming materials, whereas softscaping, that's the plants. They're living water consuming materials. So you can see this is an example of the project that Martine is sharing with us in this presentation. And these are all the plants. There is hardscape there, but we'll see, we saw more about that. But basically, the rule of thumb is, and a very important principle, is to give plants room to grow to maturity. So when you first put plants in, you will find that it looks more sparse. More mulch will be, and that's a ground covering, more mulch will be seen until the plants start to expand and grow to their mature size. We want that so that we don't have to do a lot of pruning and vegetation to the landfill and that sort of thing. We want to enjoy those natural shapes and characteristics of plants. On your plan, you're going to want to draw them in at their mature size. So even though they start off small, they might get 4, 5, or 6 feet wide. And so we want to draw them in at their mature size. Or as you can see on the right-hand side here, that might be what happens. These trees are supposed to be really, really big. And so they're planted too close together and they're on a corner where visibility is an issue. So here is how you figure out how close to put the plants together. If they're going to be 4 feet wide at maturity, then you want there to be 4 feet from the center of one plant to the other. And I always use a measuring tape. So keep that in mind. It's a good rule of thumb. When you're selecting plants, start to think about what is the function. During our first webinar, we talked a lot about what our family needs, what we want to achieve, what our goals are, what are the aesthetics and so forth. So think about plants in this way, as you see on the screen, that they have different functions, okay? So let's keep that in mind. Water use classification's extremely important. There's high, moderate, low, very low, and none. None and very low oftentimes can be for California native plants, like the one that's on the right-hand side. Once it's established, it does not need water or doesn't want it. Keep in mind though, and I'll talk about this, all California native plants are not necessarily low water use. If they grow naturally along a stream, that's your first clue. They might want more water. And the other thing is, this is all once established. So once we bring a plant home from the nursery, we plant it in the ground, it will need regular watering for about a year and before we can start weaning it and giving it the amount of water that it needs when it needs it. The other thing we like to point out is that drought tolerant and low water use is not the same. Unfortunately, we hear a lot, oh, let's have a drought tolerant landscape. That's great, but it doesn't mean that those plants are necessarily low water use. So drought tolerant, and the reason it's good to use plants that are drought tolerant is because droughts are cyclical. We've had them before, we will have them again. But these plants can survive, not thrive necessarily, on just seasonal rainfall, infrequent watering, and repeated periods, and this is important, repeated periods of dry and wetter conditions. But during those dry conditions and the droughts, they generally can recover. It's optimum, not always possible in the real world, to have these plant categories, as you can see on the left side of the screen, on their own irrigation valve, their own zone, so to speak. If you have a lot of trees especially, and you can have them on their own valve, that's great, because then they can be watered on their own schedule, the amount of water that they need that's really going to soak in deeply into the soil. Whereas we've heard a lot about lawns often don't have as deep roots, right? And it's more 4 to 6 inches deep perhaps. And so we just want to be sure to try to group those plants in these categories, you know, all the low water use plants together, all the moderate water use plants together. And you can have more than one zone of those different water use categories, but we just want to be sure to group those plants together and then irrigate them with their own zone. I spoke a bit about Mediterranean type plants coming from regions around the world with climates similar to ours. And so we hear a lot about that. Let's select Mediterranean type plants. Cool, wet winters and warm, or in our situation, hot, dry summers. That's what these plants thrive on. Also select low California natives, and later on we'll show you a great resource for this. It's important to think about, which is very different for us, to think about our landscape, our list of landscape plants to be about 70% natives, and about 30% of them could be non-native. That doesn't mean invasive, that just means they are Mediterranean types, but try to have more and more California native plants. Also, a tip is to use their botanical name when you're selecting them, and when you're ordering them or buying them at the nursery. That will help you to ensure that you're getting the plants that you want. Here are some of the characteristics of low water use and many drought tolerant plants. As you can see with this rosemary, very, very tiny leaves, or maybe gray-green colors as you see here, or fuzziness, hairs on the leaves. Those are some of the characteristics that these plants have to help them either not absorb a lot of sun and also to retain moisture. When we think about sun, I show this picture here of an open oak woodland because that speaks to full sun. Plants that want full sun, they want 10 or more hours, toughest conditions. And as you can see, if a plant says, if a label or description for a plant says that it wants 5 to 10 hours of direct sun, then that's going to be a sun to part shade. And you can see as it goes on here, but plants that desire shade, less than 1 hour of direct sun a day. So that's very important. And then along with the water use requirements, like the low water use plants that you're grouping together, also make sure that those plants are selected and grouped by their sun. So also full sun plants together, part sun plants, and so forth. Lots and lots of characteristics when you think about plants. It's not just about the flowers. So think about all the different characteristics that we can enjoy from plants. And then as you're considering the color and the color schemes and themes that you want, here's an example of how this color of this ground color, the chartreuse ground cover, is repeated in a decorative container as well as the door. Invasive plants, please visit plantright.org and learn about what plants are invasive to our area. That means they don't belong here, or the conditions might be just so perfect that they are thriving and taking over and basically taking away from the plants that belong here, fertilizers or nutrients and water and so forth. So plantright.org will help you to find out what those plants are that we should be using here. Also, mulch should be in your plan. Mulch is magic. There are many, many great uses for mulch. Anything on the soil surface, such as these pot shards, can be mulch, but they absorb heat, they're hard to walk on and that sort of thing, and they don't do anything to improve the soil. Whereas natural leaf droppings and organic mulches really can help to improve the soil, retain moisture, reduce growth of weeds, and so forth. So I encourage you to look up and see what different benefits you can have from mulch, and always have a nice thick layer, at least 3 inches. So Martine, will you talk with us for a bit about some of the features and structures in landscapes?
Yes, features and structures, they're very important elements in your landscape because in so many areas, they really give space for you to do, have activities outdoors for you and your family or your friends. They also provide shade and different colors, different textures. They're great support for plants, like we can see here with arbors. Also, in many cases, depending on the size of your, for example, of a deck, you may not be able to have a tree close by to provide shade. So it's really helpful to have these structures to provide that. There's different structures also. Some are attached to the house and some are freestanding. So it's important to figure out which type you're going to have, what is the size of them, where you're going to locate them, because that's really going to determine them, and also what style you want to use, because like you can see here, we have different styles that you can look for. Fencing, it's very important. Fences provide different things. They can, in some ways, they can be decorative, but they really provide screening, or they provide privacy from the street or or different situations. They are also very useful to divide different spaces, and they also have many different styles. So it's important to figure out what kind of style your house has and what kind of fence you're going to have and where it's going to go. Because also with fences, it's important to check out building codes and regulations, because you cannot just put a fence anywhere. Water features, they're very important and really great to have. Why? Because in so many ways, they create a cooling effect. They bring water also. They become a water source for wildlife like bees and butterflies and birds. And they also have sound. They're great to use as focal points for something to look at and to listen close to sitting areas. There's recirculating pumps. Generally, they require electricity, although recently there have been some pumps that are available with solar power. So it's really, really great to have those. Lighting, landscape lighting. There's many reasons why we would want to have landscape lighting. There's some positive things and some negative elements about it. The importance of it, we want to really, we put lights so that we define entries, so that we know where the door is in the evening, or also to define steps and stairs. Any change of elevation, we want to make sure that we have a light so that when you're walking in the evening, you know that there's that change of elevation. It's also important to use it in entertainment areas. Now, negative impacts is really important to consider. One is the consumption of energy, but also at night, it disrupts wildlife and the ecosystem. So it's really recommended to have dimmers or timers so that they only come on they come off after a certain time of the day. Another important element is the details, the character that you want to have in your garden. In so many ways, it defines yourself, what you like, who you are, what you want. We can see here 3 different examples. We have this really amazing, colorful bench on the right side. Then we have a more meditative garden with a little statue there that actually that was sorry, I think we lost the presentation. So the elements, you need to really look at those elements, because they're really going to define the style. They really define what you want in your garden, and they define your character. So they will really be a great asset for you in your landscape. Another element that is really important is containers, pots. They really help to accent or complement different elements in your landscape. For example, the color of it may contrast or complement your hardscapes. Like for example, on that one on the right, the wall. They come in many different shapes and sizes, so it's important to look at them, and it's really important to make sure that they really complement what you have, because they are part of the style of your landscape. So really, they're very useful to have in your design, and just make sure that you know what the intent of them are. Next slide.
Hi there, Martine. So will you talk with us about the final plan a little bit? I think I've lost him again.
But yes, but I cannot see this slide of the
All right.
final plan.
Rebecca, can you see the presentation, Rebecca?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue on here. Huh?
So real quick, since we were kind of talking about borders and things while we're trying to get Martine back, Missy was wondering if cobbles will work for border edging.
Yes, that's a great question. Cobbles will work just fine as border edging. And they're nice also because when we put down, say, 3 or 4 inches of mulch, then that will help to really retain it well. What I will add, though, is I don't really promote using cobble and rock, or at least large areas of it, in planting areas and around plants, because they do absorb heat and they will give off the heat also to the ambient, to the air, as well as to the soil. So if we think about our soil conditions and all the soil life, we want it to thrive and not be killed, if you will, because the soil has gotten too hot. Is there another question, Rebecca?
That was all for now. I think you answered all of the other ones closer to the beginning of the presentation.
Great, thank you. So here we have a final plan, and it's just beautiful in my opinion, where Martine is showing all of the hardscape and this wonderful flow that has been created. This great sitting area that's right outside of the dining room, for example, that could be inside here, or the living room. We have the rain garden where the water from the downspout is going to the rain garden, and then also carrying through this curved aesthetic, if you will, the curved design. So I think he's just done a wonderful job creating a lovely environment. Now you can see on the left here is what this looked like beforehand, and then not long after planting, there's that patio. Here is this circular area because the client wanted sort of a meditation and a nice soothing place. And so this is sort of a meditation walk that she would be able to take and really use all of this landscape. Many, many uses for it, as you can see here. Here's another before. Here's a close-up of that. There's a metal structure here that's tiered that Martine created, a lovely shaded seating area. Do we have any other questions just yet? I'm going to go through a few resources for us.
None right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. We are so fortunate in the Sacramento region to have many, many resources, free, online, and available. The Regional Water Authority has a wonderful plant database, Waterwise Gardening in the Gold Country, BeWatersmart.info, BeWatersmart.info. So this is a plant database. There are also examples of landscapes, photos where you'll see a little box that you click on the box and it'll pop up what that landscape is, what plants it has in it, I'm trying to say. Also, there's a wonderful resource there, as well as this homeowner's guide to a WaterSmart landscape, which basically takes us through all of the steps that we have been talking about throughout today's webinar. So again, if you have any, I want to remind people, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. Now, this is a wonderful website. It's CalScape, part of the California Native Plant Society's website. For example, I entered in the address, as you might notice this, Rex, it's the address for the Citrus Heights Water District. And what pops up are a list of plants, 357 plants that are native to that area. If you click on one of them, you then get all these descriptions about what wildlife is supported, what size they are at maturity, what their sun and moisture or water requirements are. A fabulous resource, so I encourage you to go there. Also at puddlestompers.com, this is a resource with 4 landscape designs, irrigation plans. There are 75 plant profiles, irrigation tutorials. There's all kinds of tutorials. If you want to learn all about irrigation valves, there's verbal, spoken tutorials there. Also about drip and so forth. And very near and dear to my heart is the WaterSmart plant list for the Sacramento region. So this plant list is housed at roseville.ca.us/plant list. And basically there are over 700 plants appropriate for our region. And it's broken down by category, which ones are drought tolerant. It will show which ones are native, which ones resist deer, which ones tolerate recycled glass, with recycled water, and also which ones are fire resistant. So, and if you just click on the common name, then you will be taken to an online source for all kinds of pictures about those plants. So that's really very exciting. So we want to end today, before we take any other questions, just with a reminder that our landscapes are functional, maintainable, environmentally sound. They use energy and water wisely. They are cost effective because these are landscapes that we refer to as regenerative. They live a long time. They give back over and over again by continuing to be water efficient, by continuing to use resources wisely, and supporting wildlife, our garden life, the bees, butterflies, and so forth. I wanted to give a plug here for the Sylvan Ranch Community Garden. I encourage you to visit the garden and look forward to seeing information on the Citrus Heights Water District's website, because there's going to be some interesting and exciting projects going on there for the community that the Water District is sponsoring. So stay tuned for more information about that. We do hope that we will have more WaterSmart workshops next fall, or this coming fall. I think Rex might have said this, that initially we were planning to have this webinar be an actual hands-on in a classroom, everybody working together to do some simple designs. The next ones we hope we will be able to have, because those are going to be hands-on, putting pieces and parts of irrigation together, really learning how to position plants, space them, and plant them properly. So any other questions that have come into the chat? Anything else that you'd like to add, Martine and Rex?
We do have one additional question, and Viorica wanted to know if the community garden was accessible to the public. So I'm going to have Rex handle that one.
Great.
Is the community garden accessible to the public? It is. If you are not a member, you would have to make arrangements prior to visiting the garden, as it is secured. And you could always give me a call, get a hold of me. I can take you over there, make sure the gate's open, and you can walk through. If you're interested in signing up for a plot at the garden, I know that they do have plots available. So you could, again, contact me. I could go ahead and give you the information, and we could get you signed up to start your own garden plot over there. They have several boxes that are freestanding that each gardener takes over and plants their edibles. A lot of folks are planting also butterfly attracting plants and bee attracting plants, and to bring those in to help promote pollination and just add a little bit more to the garden. So yes, it is accessible. It's just not, you just can't show up over there. But if someone's over there, they're all very friendly and welcoming and would probably be happy to show you around.
Great, thank you, Rex. Is there anything else, Martine, or any other questions, Rebecca?
The only other question was someone asking if they could use their address, I believe, for that plant website or database, and we let them know, yes, you can definitely use your own address, and that's one of the beautiful things about that service.
Yes, absolutely. You can, and even if you've got friends or family at other places in California, I've done this. It's kind of fun. I just enter in their address, and then I get this list of plants that are great for them. It's pretty exciting. And even at the bottom, it'll show you nurseries that carry those plants. That's a big win in my book.
Yes, it's a fantastic site, a really great resource.
Great. Oh, Rex, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Yes, I know a lot of people want to mute me. No, that's a great resource, and I would urge you to look at that before you visit a nursery so that you can get the wheels rolling about what might work, and then you know what to look for when you get to the nursery. And because there's always a different variety that you might see, and it's always good to try to educate yourself before you go looking.
And keeping in mind, you know, again, plants that are appropriate for our region. You know, we will sometimes, unfortunately, here comes a cat. We will sometimes, unfortunately, see in our local retail nurseries plants that aren't supposed to be here, or don't, you know, they're not native to this area, or just not quite right for our zone. And I don't intend to speak badly because of that. I'm going to take me off video because I have a cat's tail wagging around here. But you know, plants are beautiful, so they like to bring in new plants for people to buy. So I'm just saying, be aware, and choose wisely and select plants that are appropriate for our area. Okay. So if we don't have any other questions, Rebecca?
I did have somebody raise a hand, but I don't know if they had a question or not. I'm hoping that they can enter it in the chat. So
Okay.
Robert, if you can hear me, if you could ask your question in the chat, if you do have one. And Victoria mentioned that she would love to have to attend some workshops online or face-to-face when possible. And we definitely would love to see you all face-to-face as soon as we safely can and
Yeah.
are allowed to. And in the meantime, we will likely be scheduling a few more virtual meetings until we can meet in person again.
Great. Thank you all for joining us. If we're ready to close this down and there's no more questions, we look forward to seeing you in the future, and please go online to the Citrus Heights Water District's website, the events page on Monday, where these presentations as well as handouts will be posted.
Yes, and then we have one more a question asking us to please provide the website for valve and drip lines.
It will be in the, do you mean in the New California Landscape where there were those tutorials that I spoke about? That's going to be puddle stompers, and it will be on one of the slides. So we will definitely have that. Will that take care of it? Or feel free to email me and I'll email it to you. Okay?
Perfect.
Great. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate it. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.